My coworker at the laundromat kept hiding inside the machines. Last year, I worked at a laundromat near my parents before I moved away to college. I saw the advert in the window when I was shopping with my dad and figured it was an easy way to earn some money. The woman who ran the laundromat interviewed me and I started that same day, but not before she introduced me to her daughter, who also worked there. She was called Mia, was really petite and really odd. The first time I met her, she immediately said, "Hey, can you do this?" Then she did this weird thing with her eyes that made them vibrate. It's hard to explain, like they were rapidly moving side to side. And the whole time she had this toothy smile on her face like it was the most amazing thing in the world. Mia must have only been a year or two younger than me, so still in her teens. But her behavior seemed really juvenile and kind of try hard. Anyway, I just figured she was trying to break the ice in her own way, so just kind of rolled with it. I got through the rest of the day with just small talk and didn't think too much of it. I was barely a week into the job when I first caught her hiding inside one of the machines. She'd somehow managed to climb up and curl herself up in one of the big tumble dryers. I wouldn't have even noticed had I not walked past and heard her giggling inside the drum, scaring the crap out of me. "What are you doing?" I asked, annoyed she was de-skiing around whilst I was working my butt off. Her large eyes watched me in the darkness, her legs pressed up against her flat chest. "I'm just cleaning it." "Right. Okay." I'd literally cleaned the lint out of the machine just this morning, so didn't buy her crap for 1 minute. Anyway, she climbed out of the machine like a creepy gymnast shortly after, earning a few strange glances from some of the customers, but no one was hurt. The next time was worse. About 3 days later, I was helping this young mom set up a load of laundry after her machine broke in her apartment. It was her first time in a laundromat, so she didn't really know where to start and had brought her kid along too, although she wasn't doing a very good job of keeping an eye on him. I'd just finished walking her through the different powders, prices and settings when I heard that same eerie, echoing giggle again towards the back of the store. Only this time it was followed by a child's laughter. As soon as I heard the sound, I had a weird hitching feeling in my gut. Although I'd only known Mia for about a week, I knew leaving a random kid with her would be like leaving them unattended by an open electrical socket. Anything could happen. "Sorry, I'll be right back," I said to the mom, leaving her to load her washing into the machine. Most of the machines in the laundromat were 10 kilograms washing machines. We also had a few larger 18 kilograms and one massive front-loaded 33 kilograms machine used for washing duvets etc., which Mia's mom had affectionately christened the Beast. The whole time I'd worked there, I'd never seen it used once, yet I found Mia half inside the Beast that day. Playing with the kid stood in front of it. Her bottom half was inside the drum, elbows resting on the rubber seal with the door open as she handed quarters to the boy. She was pulling funny faces and doing that weird thing with her eyes again, making him laugh. The sight made me freeze for a second, wondering what the hell she was playing at. I heard the boy ask her, "What do I do?" "Just close the door," she explained, and press the big red button. It was only then I realized she was trying to bribe the kid into locking her inside the machine and switching it on. "Mia," I hissed, hurrying through the maze of machines to confront her. "But what will it do?" the little boy asked her. "I'll go on an exciting ride." I finally reached the door and grabbed it, putting an end to the madness. Both Mia and the kid looked annoyed, like I'd interrupted a great game of theirs. "What did you think you were doing?" I snapped. "It was just a little fun, right, kiddo?" The boy laughed as Mia tousled his hair before he finally scampered off back to his mother, who was still piling dirty underwear into the machine at the other end of the store, oblivious. "Hey, just chill," Mia said, sensing my anger as she slid out of the machine. "He wasn't really going to do it." I shook my head and walked away, knowing the kind of crap my own little brother would do for a few dollars. Later that day, Mia's mom came out of her office to check on us, and I thought about ratting Mia out right there and then. But the way she seemed to always dote on her strange daughter like the sun shone out of her butt made me pause. Why would she believe me over her own flesh and blood? After all, I hadn't even made my first paycheck yet, and I really needed the money. That thought alone ultimately made me decide to just let it slide. I didn't know how much I'd come to regret not bailing right there and then. A few days later, Mia and I were both working the evening shift. It was nearing closing time, and the place was dead. I was just putting a damp sock in the lost and found basket when she appeared at my shoulder and asked, "Do you like me?" I frowned and focused on the sock. Yeah, of course. I knew I'd over-egg the lie as soon as it left my mouth, but I wanted to keep the job at least until college started. Then why do you never look me in the eye? I forced myself to turn away from the basket and finally face her. What'd you mean? Do you like me? Her face had a sudden seriousness to it. Whenever I'd seen her before, she'd always had the ghost of a smile on her lips and a playful look in her eye. But now she looked almost disappointed in me somehow. My mouth felt dry as I croaked out a yes. Liar. I felt my awkwardness switch to fear as she did that weird vibrating thing with her eyes again. Only this time they seemed to pull mine in. It was like I had tunnel vision all of a sudden. I tried to take a step back, but my legs felt cut off from my brain. Instead, they followed her as she slowly walked backwards towards the row of machines lining the rear wall. Panic set in as I realized she was leading us straight towards the beast. The playful look on her face returned as she sensed my fear. "Don't worry," she said, her voice sounding like it was at the end of a tunnel. "It's just a little fun." Her vibrating eyes never left mine as we reached the huge machine. She opened the door at her back and started to climb in. In my periphery, I saw her arms and legs contort in a nightmarish way. The whole time her head stayed fixed in space, her eyes now the center of my universe. Once she'd crawled inside, her voice called to me from the darkness of the drum. "Close the door and switch it on. Wash cycle, max spin." I felt powerless to obey. I watched as my arms closed the door and programmed the cycle. The panic inside of me rose, making me feel like I'd vomit if I still had control over my body. As my finger hovered over the start switch, I held onto one last sliver of hope. The cycle wouldn't start without money, and I was fresh out of quarters. Yet as she ordered me to start the machine and the button clunked home and the door locked without any complaints, I realized she already preloaded the coins. The sick creep had planned this right from the start. I heard the machine fill with water and felt tears spring into my eyes as I realized I was about to watch someone drown to death in the worst possible way. The drum part filled to her chin, but Mia never took her eyes off of me, not even as the machine started to spin. I didn't know if it was the trance-like state she'd put me in, or if her neck wasn't human, but her head filled that thick glass door and never rotated an inch. I remember watching a nature documentary on birds of prey and how owls' heads remain stable in flight to better track their prey, and Mia's face reminded me of exactly that. Just this pale, big, black-eyed face staring back at me through the glass. She must have forced me to stand like that, watching her drown for a good half hour, because I remember the floor starting to shake as the machine hit its spin cycle. The drum whirled about her horrid face like an optical illusion, pulling me in and never letting me go until finally, the sudden surge of power caused the lights overhead to flicker. My eyes lost sight of hers for a moment in the darkness, and I blinked for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The top halves of my eyeballs felt like dry gritted glass as they finally slid down on the tears collecting below. Suddenly in control of my own body again, I flung a hand over my eyes and looked away. I heard Mia calling to me from the machine, trying to get me to look at her again, but I wasn't falling for it. My brain felt foggy and my legs felt drunk. For a split second, I thought about trying to switch the beast off before realizing it wouldn't work mid-cycle, and it'd only release the true monster currently trapped inside of it. Whatever Mia was clearly wasn't human, and I dreaded to think what she had planned for me next. I remember half running, half stumbling past her mom's office door, praying it wouldn't open in case she tranced me too. Thankfully, I managed to stifle my sobs, and it stayed shut, leaving me to slip out the laundromat door into the night. I never went back again. When my parents asked why I quit, I told them I needed more time to focus on my studies instead, which seemed to shut them up. A couple of days ago, I finally mustered up the courage to look up the laundromat on Google Maps Street View. I didn't know if I was hoping to see if the store had closed, or if anyone had left any bad reviews complaining about the creepy teenage girl that worked there, but I found neither. Instead, all I saw was what looked like another ad for hire in the window and the silhouette of a small woman with bleached blonde hair staring out the window. I didn't know if that was Mia or just a bored customer, but I closed that browser window real quick. I'd hoped telling my story on here would somehow help me to process it, but now I've told it, I don't really feel any better. I still can't use the dorm laundromat because every time I close the machine door, I see her creepy owl-like face staring back at me. I'm either hand washing or buying new clothes these days, which is breaking my bank account. I think I need help. Maybe I should see someone. Story 2. It's digging beneath my bedroom. My dad never let me own a phone. He'd already lost one son to an online predator, and he wasn't going to let it happen again. I tried to explain that I wasn't like Kyle. I didn't want to meet up with anyone from the internet. All I wanted was to message my friends and watch YouTube videos on the bus. But Dad wouldn't have it. Since Kyle disappeared, I barely left my room. When dinner was ready, I waited until Dad had finished eating before I grabbed my plate. Easier that way, without him watching. If I ate too slowly, he'd snap. "What? Not good enough for you." Before, Kyle used to redirect our old man's anger at himself, shielding me from the worst of it. He'd taken a beating once when I knocked over a can of red paint in the garage. Whenever someone asked about the purple bruise under his eye, he'd say it came from playing hockey. I never got the chance to thank him for that. I worked part-time bagging groceries at the Quick Mart and saved $200. One of my friends, Devin, sold me a cheap Motorola smartphone. I added people's socials, installed YouTube, Spotify, and a few other apps, and set up this Reddit profile. I couldn't risk Dad finding out the phone, so I pried up a floorboard in our bedroom, my bedroom, to hide it. I had to keep reminding myself of that. Without Kyle, there was no more our room, our desk, or our wardrobe. It was all mine, and that's all it would ever be. With steady internet access, my morbid curiosity got the better of me, and I Googled Kyle's name. Recent articles popped up, and a headline on an obscure news site froze me. Father investigated in missing child's case. The photo showed Dad stepping in or out of his Lexus. Suddenly, his boots echoed on the staircase. I slid the phone back under the floorboards and hopped into bed, pulling the cover to my chin. Dad leaned in my doorway, slurring. "G-night, Bailey." Lately, I caught him hiding a flask of whiskey in his jacket. It hadn't been this bad since the early months of the divorce. "Good night, Dad," I replied, but a question escaped me. Is there any new information on Kyle?" His expression sobered. "You know the rule. We don't talk about it. It's not for you to worry about." When he left, he kept the door ajar. I considered closing it, but if he went to the bathroom during the night and found it shut, he'd chew me out. I rolled onto my side and tried to sleep. I was beginning to drift off, my thoughts bleeding into hazy dreams, when the sound started. SCRTC, SCRTC, SCRTC. It reminded me of nails on skin or a shovel in dirt. I looked down at the floorboard I'd hidden the phone under, and the scratching stopped, as if it were saying, "Yes, it's me. I'm here." Had I left Spotify playing by mistake? Carefully, I slipped from the bed and crouched by the floor, glancing at the door to be sure Dad wasn't watching. I pressed my ear to the boards and listened. SCRTC, SCRTC, SCRTC. Then I recognized the sound. Fingers clawing through soil as if something was climbing up from beneath the house. I jumped back into bed and closed my eyes, desperately trying to ignore the sound. It was an absurd thought, not one a rational mind interprets. Yet I couldn't bring myself to lift the floorboard and look inside. The next morning, I asked Dad what it could be. He had an immediate answer: rats. They'd probably nested in the walls and floor. One must have fallen into a gap and trapped itself. Night after night, the scraping continued. I wondered how long a rat could survive 5 days. A week. By the end of 2 weeks, I knew it couldn't be a rat. The sounds grew louder, closer. At times, when there was no wind outside, I'd hear weak, whistling breaths creeping up from the floorboard. I forced myself to endure it for 2 more days, determined to block out the noises until they faded, until last night, when everything changed. The scratching began as usual around 2 or 3 in the morning, but after a few hours it stopped. Silence stretched, and for a peaceful moment I thought it may have stopped. But then the scraping resumed, rougher. Fingernails against wood. The loose floorboard wobbled open as something shifted beneath. Too terrified to look, I grabbed a stack of textbooks and placed them onto the board. The wobbling ceased, but on the other side the scratching continued. I stayed awake until dawn, and at first light, I finally removed the textbooks and lifted the floorboard. Inside, my phone was gone, fallen into what had replaced it. An arm-sized hole leading into blackness. My heart pounded as I stared down the void. Without my phone, I had no light to shine inside and see how deep it was, so instead I leaned closer and hovered my ear over the hole. Breathing. The weak, whistling breaths I heard earlier, like the lungs were filled with dirt. My pulse quickened. It couldn't be true. It'd be ridiculous to even consider it. But I found myself confronting the possibility. Something was buried down there. At school the next day, I borrowed Devin's phone and called my number. Devin gave a short laugh. "You think the thing in the hole knows how to use a phone?" The phone rang 7 times, then clicked as someone answered. "Hello?" I whispered. A voice I knew all too well, Kyle's voice, crackled through the static. Don't trust him. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share, and subscribe the channel Mark Story.